Lovely. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Software Delivery Leadership Forum, the online open and interactive discussion area on topics related to Agile, DevOps, and continuous delivery. I'm Sam Fell.
And I'm Anders Wahlgren. And today's topic, whatever business you're in, humans are at the heart of it. In today's fast-changing world, what types of skills are most in demand, and where can we invest to keep the humans of DevOps at the top of their game? So join the conversation. Today we'll discuss findings from the 2019 EDOSR survey, learn what types of skills are most in demand. We're going to talk about pragmatic approaches to hiring and upskilling an increasingly distributed team, and connecting IT with the business to gain better alignment via mutual understanding. Back to you, Sam.
Lovely, thank you. And to help us have this conversation, we're joined by a few very special people. Our first special person will be kicking off the presentation. We're going to have 30 minutes of knowledge-packed presentation about this Enterprise DevOps Skills Report from our friend Evelyn Orlick. Evelyn, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Anders, and welcome to everybody else.
Thank you, thank you. So Evelyn, can you introduce yourself to the folks who are listening in so they get a little background and know who you are and what you're bringing to the table?
Absolutely. Evelyn Ehrlich is my name. I'm research director at the DevOps Institute, which really means that I'm responsible for conducting research in the DevOps team and DevOps topics. They vary greatly. Before that, I spent almost 13 years at Forrester Research. For those of you who know Forrester, also syndicated research. And I have been doing nothing else than IT all my life, really. And I live in Germany now, southern part of Germany. And today we have a beautiful day outside.
Wonderful, very nice. And so, Anders, if you could go to the next slide while we prep. So we're really excited to have everybody joining. We've got people from all over Europe that have signed up for this. It's very important to CloudBees that we have something that is very inclusive. We're creating a program, the Software Delivery Leadership Forum is really designed for the audience. This came out of, we had our CloudBees Days, which was a regional event that we did last year. We traveled to lots of different cities all across America and Europe. And this year, obviously, for COVID reasons, we can't do that. So we wanted to make sure that we were having an opportunity, because during those CloudBees Days, ton of conversations happened, great learnings for CloudBees people, for audience members, and we wanted a way to capture that. And so with the Software Delivery Leadership Forum, it's really, for the folks that are listening in, it's really about you. And so we're having Evelyn come and talk about a topic that we know is going to be important to you, and that's upskilling your people and hiring and getting great folks. And then also going to be having this larger panel where we're going to be talking to actual practitioners about what they're doing. We would love your questions. So as we're going through this first 30 minutes of material, please ask your questions, post them here. I'll be responding in real time, and I'll also be representing those questions to the panel once the panel opens up. And we do have a fantastic panel of experts that we will be introducing later. So stay engaged, stay respectful, and learn something. And that's really all you have to do for the next hour and a half, and we're thrilled that you'll be joining us. Next slide, please. And then probably I'll just say next slide again, because yep, there it is, because now we're on to our featured speaker. So Evelyn, can you kick us off, please, and tell us about essential skills in the new decade?
Yeah, absolutely. A very dearing topic to myself, or very important topic to myself. And skills has always been a challenge across all the organizations and all the companies I've helped. Now, at the DevOps Institute, I want to quickly share with you who we are, because that's important. We really are an organization orchestrating and trying to bring people in the DevOps space together. We are trying to introduce a variety of new things. Of course, you can see the framework: skills, knowledge, learning, and ideas, very important. But really what you need to remember, it's an institute where we're trying to orchestrate and bring folks who are in different stages of the DevOps journey together. We work with vendors, we work with all kinds of other institutes, of course, with individuals who are in the enterprise, small or large. And my CEO partner, Jane Grohl, and I actually started this project about 2 years ago when we met at DUS in London. everybody was always talking about skills, and we looked at each other, we're like, okay, that sounds great, but what skills is actually there? What is it we need to find out? So I left London and I said, all right, Jane, let's work on that together. And here we are, the second year already, with the data we have and the knowledge we have, which is what I'm very excited to share with you.
Because this is pretty new, right? The research idea for this, like you said, there were people that were doing surveys about all other parts of DevOps, right? What tools and what, but no one was really focused on the humans, right?
Exactly.
And they're kind of important. We're kind of important.
Exactly, Sam. Yeah, so the DORA work, which again, Jean Kim and others had done a great job on understanding all the different type of things, what metrics, what the cycle times are, the state of DevOps, which is fantastic stuff. But there wasn't really a lot of beef there relative to what is necessary, what are the must-have skills. And so in combination with a variety, and again, thanks to CloudBees, also Robert Half, we have done some great work. And so let's dive into some more of that. I think that's why we're here for. Again, thank you to CloudBees. We had a variety of other sponsors, but the first thing we wanted to find out was what were the challenges relative to the journey, because again, all of us always said, oh, well, when I talk to vendors as an analyst, it's we help you on automation, and it's really all about the technology and automating the processes. Well, when I spoke to the enterprises, the CEOs, CTOs, CIOs in inquiries, it really always boiled down to, first, how do I actually change the culture? And DevOps is, as everybody knows, a major cultural movement. So when we ask the question, what are the challenges you're having relative to these different topics, you can see there are three: people, process, and technology. And it's not that there are, one more than the other. It's really an equal share, which I think
pretty crazy amount of equality across the three of them. I mean, that's
exactly. And that to me was like, okay, now I have kind of always suspected that, but now I have data. And as an analyst, we live by data, as you know. So that was quite the interesting thing to look at. Let's go to the next slide. I am excited to see that there is a fantastic race, and I know Robert Half is here to help many organizations fill those gaps in terms of their folks looking for people. But here is, you can see the race for the DevOps human in 2020, both the global and in EMEA. And I put those both up there because it doesn't look very different. You can see in the global race, there's 52% right now who are actually recruiting or plan to recruit for DevOps humans. That's the global. And in Europe, it's a little higher, 66%. Now, remember, this is pre-COVID-19. Now, it would be really interesting, and as we're kicking off the new survey for 2021, of course, we will ask. So Sam, I know you're going to already ask, what's going to be the difference, right? Next in this next phase. So we'll find out. Right. There are still, to my surprise, because everybody thinks everybody is doing DevOps, even though the enterprise adoption is there, and we see quite a bit. There's still 17% global and 14% in EMEA and the UK who say we don't really know. Is it because they don't necessarily have yet kicked off DevOps? They have maybe are still in the investigation phase. And then you can see some of them have no plans, and then there's quite a few who have completed their cycle. When we opened up the survey in October, we let it run until January. So this is October to January data. One more data point, which is important, we had tremendous response. We had over 1,300 survey respondents join us and help us. So if anybody on the audience here is who joined us and answered, I can say only thank you.
Very nice.
Let's continue and go a little bit deeper into the data. We also asked about upskilling. What kind of programs do organizations have? And here I have only put up the EMEA and the UK. What are they planning in terms of, or what upskilling programs do they have? And there's the good news and there is some ugly news. I think the only European optimist. So let's start with the good news. There is 28% of the survey respondents saying they have a formal upskilling program. So that's great. There is, if you add the don't have and the currently developing, let's assume that they're kind of together. So we have 57% who are starting to do some kind of an upskilling program. The scary part or the ugly part is that there were 10% who didn't know. That really was a bit scary to me, saying if you are in an organization and you don't know if you have an upskilling program, you better get with your HR and your team leader or your organizational management, your leaders, and understand what's happening. Because saying that you don't have one and you don't know about one, I think are two different things.
Yep. Yep. And I just posed that question to the audience because I'd love to find out the folks. I love that we're getting European-centric data for this. So thank you very much for breaking that out. That's really interesting. And then the other thing is I'd love to find out how the folks who are on the webinar, what they're seeing. Do they have an upskilling program that they know about? I'd love to know if the data matches up. I bet it will.
I hope it will. All right. Let's continue a little bit further, and as you can see, we're kind of descending from the top of the mountain down into the depth of the data. So we, of course, had to organize these categories into, or the skills into categories. Now, there is no perfect way, and that was a challenge. And I know, Sam, you helped us work on some of that. So again, thanks to you and thanks to many other folks out there. But what we did, we said, all right, let's have a key set of categories which we can at first ask in terms of must-have skills. And so you can see here, process skills and knowledge, human skills, automation skills, functional knowledge, business skills, specific automation tools, and specific certifications are the categories we selected at the highest level. We will go further into each of these categories to look at the top 10 skills. But first, the most important and interesting thing is that process skills and knowledge across really the world, in EMEA, in the UK, and globally, have been and are the top must-have skills for DevOps humans to have. With the second in line, it almost feels like with the Oscars, right? With human skills. Again, you can see here pretty much the same. And then the third is automation skills. Now, interestingly, when we started this out in 2019, the automation skills were in second place and the human skills were in third place. This is quite normal for the adoption of new kinds of things. Most people in IT, and I have been in IT since ever. Like I said, I started in 1983. That dates me, I know. I'm a COBOL programmer. Sam, you too, obviously, great. Most people start thinking, and when they adopt a new journey, they really latch on to automation tools, be it CloudBees or any of the other tools, because that's actually how they can make a progress. This was still true in 2019, but since then it has shifted that the human skills are now becoming into its race and are in the top 3 as well. Functional knowledge and skills, of course, is an important one. Business skills, now these are not the business skills as you might think of truly thinking about what do I know about my vertical, but this is really just business sassiness. It is not necessarily around, do I understand the vertical of mobile or telecom or oil and gas? Because we actually found out that in a DevOps journey, the vertical type of skills aren't as important. And that is a bit of a surprise. I know you guys had this discussion last time, but these are just business sassiness. Then specific automation tools and specific certifications, which for us at the DevOps Institute was quite interesting to know because we do also have certifications. So these are the categories. Let's go into the next click and see what else is there. Because I found it also interesting to understand, do the individuals at the different levels, the individual contributors, management, C-level, which we have here a few on our panel, which is great, and contractors, do they agree on these must-have skill categories? And interestingly, yes and no. So if you look at the process skills, all the different levels across the organization agree that they are needed and they are must-have. Now, if you look at the human skills and the business skills, there is some disagreement. Sometimes, and this is sometimes we have to be careful to draw conclusions without really going into the next level. And there's people who have done data analysis, and I know Jeff has done a lot of that, and many of you have. We can't draw too many conclusions, but interestingly that in the human skills, you can see C-level and management level is very different from the individual contributor level. So the only thing I wanted to applaud or put everybody at their heart is, if you're an individual contributor today and you think that functional skills and automation skills are important, yes, they are. But please do know that your management and your leaders are also thinking and wanting you to have and develop your human skills. And which ones we'll get a little bit further into in the next clicks. All right, let's go deeper. So the DevOps human skills, of course, we have had, I think we listed over 20 or so. When you do survey development, and that's really a survey, a passion of mine, you always have to be careful of asking too many questions or not asking enough questions, and you don't want to lose your audience halfway through, so you have to be careful. But let's look at the human skills. Here you can see the top 10 must-have skills. Again, I broke it out between global and EMEA. There are a few differences, cultural differences, probably most likely. But again, finally, we have data to support that collaboration and cooperation is one of the must-have top human skills in DevOps. Now, I know through the 10-year of DevOps journey, comms, culture, automation, lean, measurement, and skills have always been there. But and we've talked about collaboration and culture is important, but that is again now number one. Number two or number three, interpersonal skills, really knowing how are you behaving in a group, how you're connecting with others. Then, of course, solving problems, because in the space we're at, no matter if you're in development or if you're in testing or if you are in security or if you are in operations or if you are a service desk agent, problem solving is a passion of us all in IT. And then, of course, as we want to approach improvement with speed and with agility and to some extent with quality, we need to make sure we share knowledge. Everything else below, I would say today in COVID or in the times of where we're at, empathy, creativity, personal value commitment, inclusiveness, and leadership, I would almost say if we would have done this survey a little bit later, now maybe, I might see some different results, particularly empathy in the time where we're at. Of course, we still need to collaborate and share, and we still need to cooperate, but having the empathy across different countries, different worlds, different languages, and so on is very, very important. All right, Andros, you're doing a great job on the slides, by the way. Thank you. So I always liked Rubik's Cubes. If you guys have ever seen that, I'm sure everybody knows what they look like. It's these squares you can align. Well, I'm not a great graphic artist, and I couldn't make it happen in one dimension of a slide. So I used these different colors, which we learned in elementary school, how you actually can mix a variety of things. As you know, if you apply yellow and blue, it actually makes green. Yellow and red makes orange. And I believe red and blue make purple. So if you look at these things here, there is a reason to that, right? There is a mix of these human skills which we have to have, which actually transfer into emotional intelligence, the EQ. This EQ, many of us have, some of us are working on, and there's a few need a little bit more work. But EQ really leads to trust. And so for that to happen, there are critical success factors. And I really think there's two. One, we need transformational leaders, leaders who actually are able to help us to grow with these skills. And we need to have learning. Learning meaning I can make mistakes without getting punished. Now, there is still organizations who have very interesting organizational setups just because, but there is a lot of transition. All right, let's continue to the next slide and the next topic, which is the functional categories. Now, we've talked about integrated product teams. For those of you who are new in the DevOps, hopefully there is some information everywhere you can look at this integrated product team, which is comprised of multiple functions. Because DevOps is not just Dev and Ops, there is a variety of other groups which need to be participating in the DevOps. Now, when you start off, maybe it is just development and operations, but it can grow. When we asked about what are the must-have skills in the functional areas, we found that security practices, IT operations, infrastructure knowledge, and app dev capabilities are the top 4. Not a surprise. What's changed this year from last year is that security practices actually moved up because we have had a lot of challenges across the different kinds of enterprises around cyber attacks. And as we continually go towards, and now we're forced into the digital business, security practices become a very important thing. And with that, of course, we now have the DevSecOps movement. And maybe tomorrow it's the DevSec data ops movement, or right, depending on how many characters we can put on the screen. But these are quite interesting to see. If you look at I want to point out 2 key things which are important as well. One is the GRC, that's the governance, risk, and compliance. A little bit different globally than in EMEA. That really gave me a little bit of a need to dig in further into that one. So I think, Sam, there is some opportunity for us to dig in further in 21. And then I'm also a DBA, so having the DBA skills on there, and I'm Ingress and Oracle, was quite interesting, because in this next notion where we're going to the big data, even though you need analytics skills, which we'll talk about in the technical area, having DB schema knowledge is, again, very, very important. All right, more to go. We're racing to the finish line because we want to really hear from the panel. Hybrid product teams, or as I said, the integrated product teams, very cross-functional, multi-skilled team members instead of these individual specialized skilled folks. Now, we'll get to that. Hold that thought, because you're probably saying, well, I'm a DBA. Am I going to be not going to be attractive? Hold that thought until we get to the end. Important also is that this team is actually measured on customer value. So instead of focusing really just on release cycle, or maybe some of these other MTTR, MTTF, MTTI, whatever the different MTTs we have, really understanding the entire value chain, measuring value is important, because all these members have different capabilities doing things for the customer. Thank you for flipping to the next slide, Anders. Process and framework skills, I talked about that. Experience with source control models and processes, of course, understanding the process flow and analysis, really understanding how can we reduce waste when we do things is essential. Software development lifecycle, of course, you need to know how you go about that. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, those words should mean something to you. Experience in performance tuning and monitoring, a topic I've kept doing research and still do research, be it application performance management or AI ops, all topics which are near and dear to my heart and near and dear to all of you guys' heart, has increased in importance this year. Again, because of understanding how digital businesses function and how they are going to be kept healthy, the DevOps team is taking a much more aggressive stand on that, which is great. Scrum is important, and you can see there SRE, quite an interesting, both in Europe and in the global area. SRE actually has increased tremendously. To me, that is, again, as a, I would say, an ops person, having this SRE team being so important gives new meaning to the operational folks. And congratulations to Google to do that. There's a lot of adoption of SRE, and I am predicting already that by 2021, SRE will just rise, which great to hear. So folks who are listening into, get yourself some SRE training, get yourself equipped with what SRE is, understand how you can help, look at the vendor landscape. If you have questions or you need help, any of us can probably help you there.
Lovely.
And then I think the next category is, if you go on, Anders, it's the technical skills. Oh, one more thing. That's right. I wanted to share with you the rise in terms of SRE, Agile, and DevOps between 19 and 20. And I think these are quite specific and important. So you can see the adoption. This is percentage, right? So for last year, 10% adopted SRE. This year, 28%. So that's fantastic. Still rise in DevOps adoption and of course in Agile, which is all good and all helps us to be much better in helping deliver value to our customers in our current time. All right, now let's move on to the technical skills. I can feel people are going, okay, so what technical skills should I have? Here, of course, I shouldn't say of course, here I think an applaud to this top winner of the CI/CD toolchain. Having skills in the CI/CD toolchain really rose here to the top. Even above cloud. So it's almost like, okay, cloud, yeah, well, we've kind of been with the cloud for long, still very important, but having CI/CD knowledge and understanding what that means is absolutely essential. APIs.
And Evelyn, last year, cloud platform and cloud environment was the top skill that people needed to have, right? And
exactly.
So understanding the execution venue was very important last year. And this year, getting stuff through a pipeline to an execution venue seems to be increasing in importance, which is interesting.
Absolutely. And I think there is great demand for additional education there, I think. And I know you guys, of course, are doing that. We, of course, as well. But yes, cloud was last year #1, still a very important topic because organizations want that agility through cloud platforms. So very important. Now, APIs, as it is a very complex environment we work in and we work with, knowing APIs and having an understanding how that works. And then I alluded a little bit to that already. It's the analytical knowledge, really sensing and understanding how and what to make out of data. Because data is good, but data connected and collaborated and contextually represented so that we can actually make decisions on is also a must-have skill. And you can see that it's not just in globally, but specifically in Europe. Experience with UI, multiple programming languages, working knowledge with mobility, of course, user experience design, frameworks, and big data. All very important, but you can see here the top 3 really around CI/CD, cloud, and APIs and analytics. Those I want to put very closely next to your heart and maybe next to your nightstand on your upskilling journey for the future. Let's see what else we have, Anders, on the next slide. All right, we're almost there to turn it over to the beautiful panel. So many of you might have maybe you've seen the last year report, maybe you've heard about I-shaped and T-shaped. I-shaped really, these are shapes by which we define an individual skill. So an I-shaped person is a person who is a specialist, somebody who is very knowledgeable about databases, particular databases. Then we shifted to the T-shape where we said, all right, it's good to have a STEM, but we also need to have very broad knowledge around a variety of other topics which are essential, just good enough to be able to collaborate and communicate with others in my team, which produces trust, increases, to some extent, the capability to solve problems. Well, I am arguing from what we have seen, if you go to the next slide, we've actually shifted to a new shape. I'm not going to know what shape we're going to be in this year, but hopefully we're going to be in good shape. But in this year, I would argue we need to be E-shaped, and E-shaped really is almost like it's the I of your specific skills, but these specific skills in the I need to be around process and frameworks because they give you a foundation. Your top is then your human skills, because these human skills go across all topic areas. You cannot just be empathetic when you do one thing. You have to be empathetic in your organization when you're there. On the right-hand side, then you have continuous automation skills, functional skills, and technical skills. And then, of course, over time, and that's really the E, you are starting to gain experience, you are exploring things, and by doing projects, you actually can show execution. And that really, that E, I see a lot of C-level are looking for, and it would be interesting for Jeff to maybe make a comment later on, how much experience versus actual, pure certifications and things I have done, how much is there the balance between that? So E-shaped, I think, is the new one. Jane, my CEO partner, likes to call it hybrid shaped. I'm going to make her responsible for the new shape of this year when we do the 2021. Maybe it's around an O. We'll see. We'll
yeah,
wait.
with the amount of ice cream that I've been eating while under quarantine or whatever, definitely round is a good shape. Pear kind of a
Pear
shape.
shaped, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I was just thinking, when I said that, I was just thinking about the same thing, Sam. Pear shaped, this is more what I look like. Agree. All right, let's conclude. So people really make the difference. And I know this sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but it isn't. Individuals actually are needing to be multi-skill up themselves. They need to take charge. Now, if you don't have a program in your company, you to some extent own your career. I keep telling my kids that, who are just graduating, necessary to do a variety of things. So skill up and challenge the organization to adapt. That can become, you have to be depending on who and where you work. Be careful with that. If you need some tips, reach out. Leaders, you need to become transformational. You need to become transformational servant leaders and really promote new ways of working. DevOps causes a lot of challenges, and that's important. And when you see people are wanting to actually change, reward them and incent change. And then from individuals to leaders to organizations need to foster and reward learning. We cannot have 10% people don't know if they have this upskilling program. It's your responsibility as leaders and organizations to help your people. And then also shifting metrics towards value. The old metrics of how many improvements have we made on our MTTR is good, but they don't really mean anything, because what we're doing in DevOps is we're increasing the experience of our customers and employees. That's what we need to remember from all of that. All right, I think that was it. If there is another slide, then just quickly, little advertisement for our skill up days. If you are enterprise Kubernetes, we're making May the enterprise Kubernetes month. We have skill up programs. With that, Sam, I think over to you.
We just participated in one of your skill up days, one of the DevOps Institute skill up days on value stream management. So you guys are doing these things monthly on different topics. I think that's fantastic. So we're happy to participate in CloudBees is happy to participate in that as well.
Yep.
So thank you, Evelyn. This is fantastic information. John is on the line here. We got a bunch of awesome comments and questions coming in. Keep them coming. We want to make this interactive. John is just, I was looking through the stats that you mentioned, and John sort of echoed my sentiments, which is like, well, all we need to do is find that person who has all those exact skills. Right? I mean, it's perfect. The full stack engineer. That was, we did another panel like this last year where we went through the same results, and we said, how do you find that full stack engineer? Well, we've got some awesome panelists that I want to bring back out. I'm actually going to we have some technical limitations for GoToWebinar. So Anders and I are going to be turning off our cameras so that we can have our other panelists join us. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'm going to ask our other panelists to light themselves up. Here they come. Hi, Ellen. Hello, Rob, Mitch. Look at this. I see all these friends coming online. Cheryl, very nice. And Jeffrey, wonderful. Look at this. And we have, I was looking through the registration list. We've got folks from all over Europe on with us this afternoon, I guess, for you folks. So we're really, again, really excited to be able to have this conversation at a time frame that's convenient for everybody, and making sure that we're really understanding what's happening in the European market. The data that Evelyn just shared shows that there is a delta between what's happening over here in the United States and what's happening over there in Europe. And it's important to understand what those differences are. So I do have some fascinating people that I want to allow introduce themselves. I'm going to start with the first person who joined, Ellen Thorne. Ellen, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Ellen. I've been leading the HR function for CloudBees for the last 2 years. My experience spans from organizational strategy, change management, recruiting, employee relations, the full gamut across all functions. Thanks for having me on the panel today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Robert Reeves, welcome back.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert Reeves. I am a full stack overflow developer. I currently work at a company called Datical, and we bring continuous integration and continuous delivery to the database, help those DBAs move into that hybrid product team.
Wonderful. All right. Mitch Ashley, welcome.
Great, thank you, Sam. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'm CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group, an analyst firm that focuses on DevOps, cloud native, also cybersecurity and digital transformation.
Lovely. Welcome. Great to have you back. Jeff Weber, welcome back.
Hi, Sam. Thank you. Jeff Weber. I'm an executive director with Robert Half Technology, sort of global responsibility for the placement of people throughout all aspects of technology. I will highlight, I'm obviously a lot younger than Evelyn, but I too am a COBOL programmer doing Ingress database. Not too many people remember Ingress anymore. So anyway, appreciate all that. And I spent a lot of time working in the DevOps space over the last 5 to 7 years.
Lovely. Awesome. And Cheryl joining us on this panel. Lovely to have you.
Thanks very much for the intro. Yeah, I'm Cheryl Rosell, and I'm Director of Platform and Live Operations at Polystream, which is a 3D interactive platform. I've been in the DevOps space for quite a few years, working for organizations like Microsoft, and more recently, before I joined Polystream, working for HSBC on their digital transformation. So very much kind of involved in the transformation of not just skills, but mindsets too.
Lovely. Very, very good. All right. Anders, let's go to that first slide. And we put this in here, and Evelyn already sort of touched on it. And I want to touch on this before we get into the real meat of our conversation with the panelists here. We've got lots of questions.
Just remember to wash your hands after you touch it, Sam.
That's right. That's right. So the fact of the matter is that the world has changed in the past 6 weeks. And there's a lot of things that people are probably thinking about a little bit differently now than they were when we were doing the survey back in November through January of last year. So as we're going through these topics, you know, we're not going to ignore the elephant in the room, which happens to be COVID-19. So we're going to be taking that into consideration, even though it's beyond the scope of the survey. So let's go to the next slide and let's start the conversation. So the first topic here is practical approaches to team upskilling. John had a really interesting comment that I want to get to, and I think Rob Reeves has, let me put it out there. I think Rob has a joke.
Maybe.
Maybe.
If you laugh, it's a joke.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
if it's just a statement. Now, John made a really good point, and he was, you know, it's the point was is like, you know, we're defining this impossible to find or create employee. And it reminded me, now keep in mind, folks, I live in Texas, so we have lots of pithy sayings and stuff like that. But there was a joke about 2 hunters in the woods coming across a bear. And one of them stops to put on running shoes. and the other hunter says, what are you doing? You're not going to outrun that bear if you sit there and put on shoes. And the hunter says, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. And I think the point here is that, yes, Evelyn with her research has pointed out like this is the ideal, but you don't have to reach the ideal. The fact that you're moving towards it means that your company is improving, your products are improving, and you don't have to get to that ideal. You just have to move a little bit further than your competition. So yes, we are going to find it very, very difficult to find these ideal, perfect employees that fit this the pattern. But the fact that you are getting there means that you're just light years ahead of the competition that are not even looking at that.
Right. Absolutely. So we are getting a lot of awesome questions in. I see France, I see Germany, I'm seeing, I believe the UK, I think there's Spain in there. So I see all you folks, I appreciate your comments. First question in is, how do we assess our team's current performance? What KPIs should we be looking at? And I don't know if anybody wants to start. Cheryl, can I start with you? How do we assess performance?
Yeah, so it's one of the things that I did when I started at Polystream was kind of skills matrix within the team, understanding what technology we have in existence and which skills we needed to mean that technology, and also with additional technology coming in, how do we upskill the team? So I did a piece of work with the team to understand where their skills are, where they need some extra support, and where there are gaps. And then started to compile a list from my new hires in terms of what skills I would need to bridge the gaps that I had in the team. So I think, you know, for KPIs, it's really understanding as a team what you can support and being honest about that. Technology is changing every day. New technologies are coming onto the market very quickly. And, you know, developers want to use the latest and greatest technology, and we have to support that. So understanding what skills you have within your team is really important. But complementary to that is also identifying the gaps, and how can you fill those gaps with your existing team, or you have to bring somebody else in, and it's kind of being honest with that evaluation piece.
Right, absolutely. And I'm going to butcher the name. Hopefully I don't butcher too bad. Hristo is saying, is there a way for us to talk about upskilling? And Cheryl, you just mentioned it, sort of the study to compare upskilling versus hiring, right? So when you're looking as a manager and you're looking at the landscape, knowing where you can sort of add skills to someone who already has some knowledge, or if you need to bring in somebody else, how do you make that decision, right? Where do you look to try and figure that out?
It's understanding where you have the skills within the team. So say, for instance, you're looking at a database expert. There's so many different databases on the market right now. Can you retrain your existing database member of your team to support a new database? When I was working at HSBC, we worked with a lot of teams that were in existence that had been supporting kind of classic technology, so technology that, you know, has been around for a long time, and there was great skills there that you could utilize and upskill them. And, you know, they're really keen to learn new technology, and developers always want something new and shiny to work with, as do engineers. So it's very much kind of working out the appetite and the desire, and the ability of the team as well. So understanding where the team has the ability to upskill, in terms of if they have a similar technology they've used in the past, normally they can use it to learn that technology given the time. So it's also making sure that you have time available in their schedule to learn those skills as well, and making sure that they're given that ability.
Lovely, lovely. Jeff, any thoughts from you on assessing current performance or KPIs for people to use, or the upskilling versus hiring sort of conundrum?
Well, I think, Sam, they go all together in my mind. And, you know, this idea of all the, as Evelyn walked through the different things from technical skills to tools to functionality to the human skills, that's really your very first question earlier was about, you know, this idea of a formal upskilling program. it really challenges a lot because there's lots of different things, right? Traditionally, we didn't think that way in our training programs. We trained people on certain tools or certain capabilities. I learned how to develop in a certain language. That's different than what we're thinking about today. And so I think it's the same with hiring, right? I think it takes a lot for an organization to tie together its upskilling training, its hiring methodology and capability, let alone then this idea of measures. So that's really why I think the aspect of DevOps becomes so critical, because it requires improvement, automation, thinking across each of those elements, not just in one area.
Yes, continuous improvement is definitely a fantastic concept within DevOps. I think Gene Kim, who's been referenced a few times, has a great saying, which is the improvement of the daily work is more important than the quality of the daily work, which I think is fantastic. Luckily, I don't have great quality, but I'm getting better every day. So there you go. Mitch, what are your thoughts on KPIs? How do you assess, or hiring versus upskilling when you've done the KPIs and you trying to get to a certain place? What are some ways that you've seen people get there?
It's a great question. It's that classic dilemma. Do you hire? Do you train? Yeah, what I'd like to do is look at maybe the problem a little bit differently. I think one of the most, if not the most important KPI is measuring your managers, measuring your leaders, because while we all own our careers, we also have managers who are coaches and also advisors and help with things like funding and like that. And I think one of the best ways to measure managers is each person in their organization, on their team, are they growing? Are they growing in their capabilities on any of those dimensions, the 3 dimensions that Evelyn talked about? Because it is a continual journey. We talked about continual improvement of our work. It's continual improvement of ourselves, right? We have interests, we have the technology's changing, environment's changing. So we have this constant pace of where we need to continually renew and refuel our own skills and our capabilities. And managers need to be held accountable to make sure they're supporting and providing the support to their people to do that. So that's something that I'd love to work with somebody like Ellen on, how you would measure that of your management team. Trust me, that'll send a big signal to your managers that this is important. Then you don't have to worry about, do we have budget or whatever, because that's what they're getting measured on.
Interesting. Alan, you're nodding your head there. What are your thoughts?
Now I'm just thinking everyone is hired. What great, fantastic points of view on this. One of the hardest things, in my opinion, that you can do as a people manager is to do a gap analysis of your team. And, knowing that there's so much that could change even within a 12-month period. Let's look back at the last 6 weeks and let's sort of think about, as a people manager, thinking about professional development and the skills required to meet our market in 12 months or 18 months is tough. And it is hard to do a gap analysis. One pitfall that I see a lot of managers do is to hire right out of the gate without doing that gap analysis. And what that ends up doing is it absolutely ends up sending a message to the team that we value external talent versus internal talent. So to me, best practice really is to be super intentional, identify which gaps are so critical to the team. And speaking of KPIs, in my opinion, I'm always a big fan of looking at outcomes. Like, what outcomes does your team need to have in the next 6 months, 12 months? It is continuous. And then when you look at external talent, really leaning into the external talent and hiring practices to bring in a gap that you just can't upskill. But when you bring that person in, knowing that that person or those people are going to complement the team and bring that skill in, so that it's almost like an upskilling strategy altogether by bringing in somebody that's going to bring in an expertise, whether it's on the human side or whether it's on the technical side. But it's going to give everyone the opportunity to upskill. So it's a really, really hard question. I'm not going to lie. And I know that a lot of managers struggle with it from a gap analysis perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. Troy in the comments here is mentioning that he's seen some DevOps job specs and it looks like people want an IT in the box, like one person, and he says he's joking that he thinks that the circle person is needed. So thank you for
The
that.
purple
comment.
unicorn.
Right, exactly. That
Yeah.
full stack engineer. A lot of people making some jokes about that full stack engineer comment.
That's how Robert introduced himself. So let's be honest, we at least have one here. So.
Oh, no, I said full stack overflow engineer. That means I Google a lot of stuff.
Well, Stack Overflow is where all the smart people steal the code.
No, I suck. That's why they made me CTO.
Yeah, failed his way to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't want this guy committing to master. Let's give him some PowerPoint. He can do slides.
Exactly. So we got some other questions from the group here. Simone asks, so are we broadening the skill profile with thinking and skill competencies from outside of traditional tech, e.g. Cinefin or complexity frameworks, etc.? So instead of thinking, Evelyn, just about the technical aspects, you've got process as a pretty large part of the take here. Did we dive into any more details around the different types of methodologies that people were using or frameworks that folks used?
Yeah, we had some of it, but again, as I mentioned earlier, designing a survey, and Mitch, I know you can relate to that. Designing a survey is always this balance. How much do you ask for? So in the next iteration, we want to find out what kind of methodologies are there. We look for design thinking. There's all kinds of different things out there. So Simone, if you are interested in helping us define some of that, or if anybody else on the panel or in the audience listening to that, I would love to work with you to dig deeper, because I think there will be some questions this year on that. As we turn the page in the morning, there is a new methodology coming up, a new kind of topic of the day I need to consider. So I think that's really what we're working on in July to dig deeper. I don't have the answers. Maybe anybody on the panel, maybe Jeffrey has some thoughts and ideas on that.
I would say I have no answers. I think the challenge with all of that is as we've been on this journey over the last X years, of DevOps, really about delivering technology value. It's hard to take what everybody else went through and then finally get to and just start from the end point, right? Start from the learning. And I think we've been over the last 10 years, at least, having to learn through it, different types of organizations, different amount of legacy, those kind of things and issues. Maybe we're getting closer and closer. That's what I would hope, that to the point where organizations that haven't made to the journey, they know what the endpoint starts to look like and they build from there. So I think it's an important part of the question that everybody in the audience might have.
Lovely. And John is just a font of questions. He's asked another good one, which I have a quippy response for, and then I'll ask the rest of the team for their actual response. His question is, how do you avoid training your competition's next hire? And so I brought this one, I trotted this one out on our last panel, and I'll do it again here. Is a CFO and a CEO are talking, or a CTO are talking, and the CTO says, hey, what happens if I train these people and they all go to the competitor? And the CFO says, well, what happens if you don't train them and they all stay? So that would be my answer to that question. Rob, you're shaking your head. What's your take?
Oh yeah, look, it's look, you got to take care of your folks, all right? And if you're going to limit their career growth because you want to keep them around, man, that's a very problematic statement. And so
that's an abusive relationship is what that is.
Yeah, that's several hundred hours of therapy to work through that. But look, you have got to, if you train your folks, if you offer them the ability to upskill to get better, one, they're going to stick around. Two, they're going to get better. Three, you're going to kick the crap out of that competitor. Yeah. That's why you're doing it. And I think that, You have no control over whether somebody leaves your company or not. So you've got to just, if somebody leaves, it's probably for the right reason, but don't make it be for the bad reason that you didn't train them and you didn't help them progress their career. Don't be that person.
Nice. Okay. Anyone else have comments on this?
I think there is, just to add to what Rob said, there's something about passion, right? Let's think about this, particularly today. I feel like I don't do anything else than work and cook, and that's it. I
And
don't
clean.
have, and clean, not much. I don't do much cleaning. Since I moved to Europe, I don't do much cleaning anymore for whatever reason. Anyway.
Oh boy.
I do research, I write, I do inquiries, and I'm passionate about it. I love what I do. And so I think if we have a team who we train and we let them expose, or we expose them into the areas where they're passionate about, they're going to be just incredible. When I think about the analysts I had working on my team, all of them were passionate about certain things. Some didn't care for the analytic life anymore and the traveling of 90%, and they went somewhere else. And so they contributed somewhere else, and we still are friends and we're still in a network. But really, it's a both side of the coin. It's the leaders, like you said, who have the responsibility to do that. But at the same time, if I'm passionate about something, then I will continue to do it. And if it is over the weekend, or if it is on a special trip or whatever, that's what I think is important to recognize.
Yep.
Just to kind of add to Robert's point is really listening to your teams. I think employee engagement and the level that says a lot, but the level that is within your organization says a lot about your organization. If you've got engaged employees, they're bought into your business requirements and your goals as an organization, they're more likely to deliver on time and be satisfied with their work and their working environments as well. So I think, you need to look after your teams, you need to look after your people. You also need to encourage your teams to share their ideas of where they want to learn, where they want to go in the future, what are their aspirations, what's their kind of like 6 to 12 month goal, what do they need to get there. So I think it's really important to help people on their journeys with setting them up with mentors so they can get the support that they need, and also get them to put together what training plans that they want and aspirations and work with them to develop that. A happy team is a very productive team. And you just take one person to be unhappy in that team to kind of unsettle the apple cart. So It's very important to listen to your teams and give them a voice and feel that you can be open and transparent. I think one of the things that Evelyn mentioned on was kind of one of the skills which is really important to have nowadays is collaboration. I think especially as everyone's kind of in this scenario of lockdown, people can feel very isolated. I think collaboration and kind of those skills to work with other members of their team makes them feel like they're committed towards kind of the general goal in the direction of the organization. That is also as important as kind of the technical skills, is that they feel that they're involved and their contributions are valid.
Yeah, that's what people want, is more than money. They want to be able to make an impact. Anand in the comments made a fantastic quote from Richard Branson: train people well enough so that they can leave, and treat them well enough so that they don't want to. You inspire a lot of loyalty and a lot of leaning in beyond just paying people money. So that's fantastic.
And I think, Sam,
go ahead.
If I could, Sam, there's an aspect that, as Evelyn talked at the end, there's leadership, there's upskilling, and then there's the individual contribution. It takes all of those. It takes a framework. It takes the technical skills, but it also takes investment, right, in the things that it's not just investment in technology. It can be investment in programs, investment in measures, investment in a lot of this. So, I think that's what makes it complex. It's not just a simple, straightforward, hey, we get the technology right and we create the right teaming environment. That's a piece of the puzzle for true organizational success, but not the total piece.
Yep. Let's roll to the next slide. While we're doing that, we've got another comment with a question for the panel. I'm going to just pose it to you. So Troy asks, we have a problem where we have to train offshore vendor employees. Do I just push back and ask them for what we've asked for, or do I have to invest now in training a vendor? so that they're working the way I want to work. And Rob, you're laughing, so I'll.
Well, yeah, because this is the difference. Now, if this was a full-time employee, I don't care where they are in the world, but they are working for your company, yeah, train them, right? Hey, you got a vendor that's asking for this, Troy, you need to find another vendor. That's the line. Like if the vendor isn't taking care of their people and looking to you to take care of that, yeah, you need to put out an RFP and get another person in there. So yes, I would push back on the vendor. Now, if this was an internal team offshore and they wanted training, absolutely, because it's so hard to hire folks in the skills that you want, so train them. But if it's a vendor, yeah, you need to find another vendor. Push back.
I do think there are relationships today as organizations partner with each other that you can have a framework of that you partner on what that looks like, right? It's not an us or them. I think it can be in certain scenarios, a partnership in the ecosystem. I don't disagree at all, Robert, with what you described there, but I do think, especially in what we do, we're now not necessarily owning the responsibility of some of the skills of that team. We're enabling that capacity, and I think then we have a partnership relationship with our clients in that sense.
Yeah, well, you're focused on the outcomes.
Exactly. That's what Ellen said earlier. I was just going to point out to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've I'll tell you, we've always had a blended approach to that. So I don't disagree with what anyone has said, but I do think it's a blended approach, meaning the vendor might have some training resources or some of their own upskilling methodologies, but we've always been part of at least some sort of consistent, training or learning opportunities together. So it's never been necessarily an us versus them. We've bridged that with some sort of blended partnership in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You might want them to go through the same training you're going through. There's also times where it's pretty early in the life cycle of the technology where you're not going to find folks. And so there's a startup cost that you might build into your financial model with them. So I agree with Robert. It's, just as we don't train our people, we expect our customers to. Of course, that's ridiculous. But in working with partners, think about them that way. There's certainly different scenarios where you may help support the training of their folks.
Right. And it's funny, you think about companies like Pivotal that do exactly the inverse of that, where you're their customer and they're sitting side by side with you to train you on these practices. So you get your team to understand the cadence and the rhythm. Simone mentions, I would have thought that the vendor contract would have included the fact that they're providing the right skills in order to deliver the service that's needed, right? Why would you sign a contract with somebody that can't, like, yeah, I need you to fix my car. I know that you're, an onophile, but I'd like you to fix my car. So, all right. Getting beyond tribal knowledge. Fantastic questions coming in. Awesome comments from the audience. I love the engagement. Please keep it up. Getting beyond tribal knowledge. So, Evelyn, you talk about process, and we're in a COVID-19 world now. So what impact has the remote work and the business disruption had on sort of knowledge sharing and upskilling of people? How do you think that that's changing? And why is it important to get beyond tribal knowledge? I'll start with you, Evelyn.
Okay. Because we are no longer next to each other, so it's not a one-to-one, it's a many-to-many. I think we need to normalize in database language how we do that, right? And we need to figure out, how do we document, how do we prepare knowledge and share knowledge with the right audience, with the right context, with the right information. And that's a lot of extra work. And so I think the first thing is to create space in your day to do that. And that becomes sometimes of the biggest challenge. And I give you an example. I used to be an on-call person carrying a beeper, again, managing, I don't know how many data centers in the United States of a big, large tech company. We never took note on anything we did. And so when things happened again the same time, then nobody, or another time, nobody knew, because we never took the time to actually document or share things, because we raced from one thing to the next. Understood, we are all in a very dynamic world, but we need to really take time. We need to reflect back and understand who needs to know what and when. And that's the challenge. It's an art really to do that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when we are in this tribal knowledge explanation and sharing, we have language barriers. In Europe, as you know, we speak multiple languages. And so if I share something with somebody from a different country, it has to be in a language we either both can understand, and if a third person is part of that, then it needs to be in a language which all three people can understand and can read or share. So that is the second challenge in this whole tribal knowledge sharing. It's taking the time and then speaking the same language, really linguistic language. I think those are the biggest challenge of what we have today.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge we see all the time with customers. And I mean, so often that I have a phrase I use for it, which is, we're too busy drowning to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
And it's you can tell when an organization is taxed along some dimension, because they're in that mode where they're not being smart. You know, they're not writing down how they fixed something so that they don't have to relearn it under stress the next time. It's usually a sign that there's stress somewhere in the organization along some dimension.
Right. And you mentioned sort of writing down what the process is, and that goes back again to the importance of process work. It goes back to the importance of the CI/CD tool chain that we talked about. It's automating all of these things. There's a fantastic video going around on Twitter of somebody who made a Rube Goldberg machine while they were home. And it shows this guy basically hand guiding the thing that was supposed to be automatic through all the different steps. And it's, you look at it, you go, yeah, 100% automated, totally automated, except for all the involvement from the human being. And getting processes that work across disconnected people who used to sit right next to one another, and it was just a, hey, I'm done with that thing, now go do the other thing. It's much harder. But I think that sets humanity up, if we're forward integrating the fact that may happen, and we're thinking about those things while we're architecting the solution. I think that's probably a good thing to be thinking about. Okay, very good. Anyone else have any sort of thoughts on the remote work and knowledge sharing?
Yeah, just as we've all gone into lockdown, it's kind of highlighted what members of the team know and what they don't know, and I think it's helped kind of get their focus in terms of what they're working on and working together. Even though my team were all based in the same office, now that they're remote, I can see them working together really well to come together on problems. Technology is an enabler, and they use the technology to just jump on a call with each other. And we run brown bag sessions every week on different topics that other team members might not be aware of. And it's really kind of heightened the awareness of what skills we have and what skills we don't in varying areas of the team. We've got different levels of experience within the team, and it's helped highlight areas of growth for the team. It's always a problem when you have kind of a single point of failure within the team, one person who knows everything, and they are the go-to person for everything. How do you break that down? How do you get that person to step back and allow other members of the team to take the slack? That's quite a difficult challenge. And I've seen it in every organization I've worked with, that you have those individuals that are the go-to person for that. How do you then turn that on its head and bring in other members of the team to upskill them in those areas? I think that's and Rob, you might have some answers on this, or Mitch. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic, that's the Brent problem from the Phoenix Project, for those of you who haven't read it. Shame on you.
Say the same thing.
Right, you definitely should read it, but that is definitely a problem. And so Mitch or Rob or anybody really have any comments on that? It's a great point.
Well, there's, there's a family friend of ours that owns a bakery in Austin, and you know, we were talking once, and he told me, "Hey, Robert, if you ever own a bakery, make sure your accountant goes on vacation for 2 weeks every year." And I was like, "To take care of your people?" And he was like, "No, to make sure they're not stealing." And I think it's applicable here with this Brent. You know, you need to make sure that person takes a vacation, that person who is so important, because you need to find out how important that person is and what they're doing. It's not about replacing Brent. It's about taking all the great stuff in Brent's head, distributing it amongst the team, and then allowing Brent to do other cool stuff.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. So how do you get that out of the Brent's head? Send him on vacation. Now, right now, that's kind of hard, but at some point.
To the living room.
Imagine a future where people can leave their houses. Rob, that's amazing.
I can't see that. I can't see that happening. It won't catch on.
Dare to drink.
If I can share a real experience, and I won't name the person, but I took over an IT team, and there was a Brent there. It was before the Phoenix project, so I didn't know about Brent, but someone who really had done a tremendous amount of work and a lot of automation, but we were solely dependent upon that one individual. And unfortunately, he saw himself as kind of job security for doing that. And the only way we ended up kind of resolving the situation, because getting him to let go was just not working. It was sort of a variation of what you're talking about, Rob, is we just changed his job. Agreed, you're going to take on something else now. And it made it so that everyone else had to step in and learn from him, because we forced the transition. So it maybe wasn't the outcome that he wanted, but it ultimately was the right outcome for everybody. So there's multiple ways of dealing with this, and a lot of times they're kind of sticky and messy and not easy. So at least that situation was for me.
Right.
I would just add, Sam, if part of what's happened over the last 6 weeks is we broke the system, right? We sent somebody on vacation. You know, the reality is at some point there'll be some version of new. Will we all go back to the way we were? Probably not, but there'll be some iterative stage. And I think what we have to be careful in my mind is not let the things of the past necessarily break down what we've just learned, right? We broke some of that system, and that's the problem to me of tribal knowledge, is it ends up becoming team centric. You know, the group of us can evolve, but if the rest of the organization doesn't. So effectively over time, we need to take the value of what we learned and then inject it back into the organization as we get into whatever the next phase looks like.
And make it accessible to people. That tribal knowledge needs to be available for lots of people. Simone, one of our audience members, we could have made her a panelist, I believe. Her comment here is, I'm a big fan of knowledge-centered service framework and intelligent swarming, because it takes the knowledge-based article beyond the thought that creating shareable knowledge strategy is more than something the service desk does. So, do you folks see much intelligent swarming? I'm putting quotes and air quotes on that. Intelligent swarming style knowledge in your teams? What does that look like in your teams? Rob or Cheryl, Mitch, maybe? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I'm going to try and make sense of the question in my own way. Documentation is a hard piece. Nobody likes to document anything. I encourage the team to build out a knowledge database of everything that we have. Whenever I start a team, I always find that it's in the same shape, where there's little documentation. If something breaks, you know, that go-to guy or girl is the person that fixes everything. And it's never really documented why it broke and how we fixed it. So then it happens again, and only that person can fix it. So documentation is kind of key to the success of a team in terms of being able to pick up other areas. So to Mitch's point about taking out that single point of failure and replacing them with somebody else, how does he get that knowledge if it's not just sat with the Brent knowledge transferring? It's the documentation. So that's also, you know, one of the first things I do with any team that I start with is understanding where they are with documentation and kind of building out a Bible of how things are put together, run books for when things break. So anybody else in the team can then pick that up. And it's good to get people to follow that documentation as well, after somebody's written it, to make sure it makes sense and they can replicate the issue or replicate the process. And it kind of ties into processes as well, having the right process around documentation. I think all the teams I've ever led, they all know me for saying, you know, that's not complete until you've done the paperwork. You have to do the documentation that goes with it. They're like, oh, you know, we finished that sprint, we finished that piece of work, that's disappeared. Where's the documentation? You can't move on to your next piece until that's documented, and somebody else has peer reviewed your documentation to make sure that they can replicate it, because that's really important. And also to that, whenever we invoke on a new project, we also do a project requirements gathering documentation as well, because there's a lot of projects that I've seen that completely go out of scope, and you kind of get to a point going, what did we want to do with this in the first place? Because nobody's ever documented anything, and it's gone wildly off path, and you can't rein it back in again. So I think gathering documentation, gathering requirements and documenting them, and getting everybody to agree this is what we're going to deliver. So you know, somebody across the other side of the room can't say, well, you're going to deliver this, and you're like, well, actually, it's documented. This is what we all agreed to. We sat in a room, we all nodded, and here's what we're going to deliver. So I think it protects the team as well in terms of kind of product scope or project scope. I think it's really important for multiple areas for documentation. I don't know if that answers the question that was asked.
I have something to add. As an automation analyst, I think it's important to understand how your automation vendors can actually help you there. There are a variety of technology capabilities within the CI/CD tool chains, within ITSM tools, within RPA tools, within 3 or 4 letter acronym tools, which I either have done a wave on or I'm doing something on. Ask your vendors who you're using, how are they encouraging the capture of knowledge. There is AI technologies and whatever else out there which can be used to make this much, much easier. We don't have to write things down anymore to the point of what we used to do way back when we did Y2K, Jeff, remember that? I think you were there. So when you do make the choices of vendors, if you have that decision-making point and ask your vendors of whatever tool, automation tools you're buying, do we have the capability to actually automate knowledge? Do we have the capability to automate that type of thing? And when I used to do waves at Forrester, we actually had that as a criteria for the vendors, and it was a highly weighted category. It's also something which helps you on top of what Cheryl just said.
If I can jump in too, I like the path you were going on, Evelyn. And another way of doing that too is it's very, documentation is always hard, right? It's the last thing, nobody wants to do it. There's never enough time because we were late getting software out, whatever. So one of the things that I found that worked is, for example, is use your help desk or your service desk organization as a point of contact and build in the knowledge capture in the ticketing process or whatever it is. And you can do simple things like just tagging tickets. And now you can go back and search things, because instead of requiring somebody to go outside of their normal process, they're really just doing the work they always did, and you added a small step by tagging and categorizing instead of writing paragraphs and documents. Now, it doesn't work for everything, but it's a great way for capturing troubleshooting and also documenting problems so that when we go to fix it in software or through what other means, you've got the great knowledge base there with just a little bit of extra work.
All right, codifying that knowledge is really important. Simone, Cheryl, thanked you for your answer. She thought that was helpful, but she also sort of mentioned that moving beyond tribal knowledge means dealing with the fears of communicating with new people, languages, etc., the not our people feeling. It prevents teams from getting ideas to cross-pollinate, and it applies with confusion between Dev and Ops and maybe even HR and finance. She says it's really about understanding who is in our tribe and how do we cross-pollinate our knowledge and skills, which I think is really well said.
Let us know when the webinar with Simone is. I'd like to sign up.
Right? She would be awesome as a panelist.
Agreed.
Okay, so anyone else have any comments on that? The disruption, we've got about 10 minutes left. I can't believe how fast the time always goes so fast.
I'll just kind of share even on, just a kind of a different lens to bring, I guess, to the conversation, with COVID, just from an HR perspective, so many unknowns, so many unprecedented times, a lot of policy making, a lot of decision making that we're having to make on the fly, and a lot of questions from our employees. So it's actually stretched our own function as a team to really think about documentation and going back to sort of the questions that come in, even through our own ticketing system, and being super intentional about not just documenting, but then just making sure that we're being proactive in communicating the documentation piece and being very intentional about that. While it's not perfect, and I'm sure that, some of the different mediums, whether it's an intranet or whatever medium that we're using to communicate, being super, super intentional in the documentation and the communication of it. I know that that's been a huge strategy of ours. Again, is it perfect? Maybe not, but it's just an interesting lens as I've been thinking through all the different dynamics of this group, certainly on the HR side, with everything that we've had going on a human level in the last 6 weeks. It's gotten us thinking about this differently too.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's hit the next slide, Anders. We got 10 minutes and we got a pretty meaty topic. And this is one that a few folks have already sort of mentioned. But understanding now the connection between all this upskilling that we're doing and the value that we're trying to create. And so some of the questions that we can sort of ask about in here: does your business and IT teams speak the same language, and what kinds of things can you do to upskill your technical teams to understand the business, and for the business teams to understand the technical, so that there's better alignment, right? Instead of having the business team say, hey, I need a whole new application written by next week. It's kind of unrealistic. How do you help them get that knowledge? Mitch, I see you nodding and looking like you know an answer. So sure.
I don't know if I know the answer, but it's actually one of the most frequent questions that I'm asked for IT leaders. How do we talk to the C-suite, or how do we talk to the business people? And I think as IT teams, technical teams often fall into the trap of, I just need to educate you on the technology so you'll understand what I understand.
Right.
And that can be a pretty big leap, just like we were talking before in Evelyn's research of, for you to become the expert in the vertical industry domain is going to be a big leap for you. Yeah. I think the cross section of that though is really sitting down with a finance person and say, help me understand how to do a cost benefit analysis or an ROI calculation. I can go read about it, but you could show me in a couple of steps. Trying to put things in business terms where you can, and at least align your goals between your organization, you as an individual, so you have line of sight. So you can say, well, if we're investing in this, why are we investing in it? It's kind of the 5 whys. Why are we doing that? What's the reason? Why is that important? And then why is that important? And at some point you'll be able to, it may not be the exact language, but you can see how this step leads to, okay, we need to get a product out quickly, right, in this market because of these conditions. Okay, now that I understand, I know how to react to that. So I think it's that context, aligning goals, try to speak in business terms where you can, and learn from other folks whenever you can, instead of trying to make folks sit in your seat all the time.
Mm-hmm. Rob, I see you nodding your head.
Well, I just, it is not our technical team's responsibility to understand the business. All right. I think it's the leaders, the managers, to help educate those folks. So when we see stuff about I want technical folks to understand the business. All right. I actually see that as a gap on the management side, C-suite executives. They're not doing their job. And so just like Mitch was saying, that business leader has to explain, this is why we're doing it. That is why this is important. This is the direction we're going. But I don't think the technical person needs to explain everything technical to that manager. Oh, well, I need to explain the stack that we're developing on. Why? Just go, you make the decision, technical leader. Right. And it's up to the executive to say, this is where we're going, and that person gets to decide, that team gets to decide. you know, I think once they understand the why and the where we're going, good things happen.
I actually would chime in with introducing new language. Let me put you back into this karma of IT. Those two characters we've used forever. We've used ever since I started in this space, and I'm now 57 years old. I admit it here. I know that's probably not PC, but I don't care.
It's fine.
All right. Information technology, that's the wrong language. That's like 1960s. What we are today, if we're thinking about where we're at, look at what we do, right? We're in the digital age. Digital means technology. But if we call this business technology and we call ourselves all business technologists, yes, there are certain business technologists which are very much on their, remember the E, the I, and the T, they might have something here, but all of us together have the ownership to develop the necessary movements forward to serve our customers. So two things. One, drop the I, call it business technology. That brings us all together. And second, start thinking from the outside in. Start thinking from those who are consuming, or those who are our clients, or those who are our whatever, in healthcare, in the verticals, different kinds of things. They see us as an organization delivering value through technology and through processes and through people. So having that change for thinking in the digital space of just IT versus the business, I think that's old thinking. I really do think by changing language and bringing the word business technology into the communication, you get a different flair. We saw that very much at Forrester. We changed that term of IT, we dropped IT, we talked about business technology, and suddenly a VP in IT and a VP of product marketing and a VP of sales and a VP of HR had the same kind of starting point. You mean we're going to improve technology to hire additional people, or to improve our recruiting mechanism, or whatever. And then coupled with what Mitch said, the budgeting then becomes a conversation of goals, rather a conversation of what feature function do I need, what blah, blah, blah do I need to make my car go faster, which is really not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I completely
Go ahead, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Sorry. I completely echo what Rob and Evelyn said there. IT used to be a separate part of the business that everybody would depend upon, and things were kind of thrown over the fence with unrealistic expectations of what's to be delivered. Times have changed, and IT used to be part of the business, but IT now becomes the business, you know, driving change in the organization, driving digital adoption. And I think that change in mindset, there's still a lot of organizations that really struggle with that, and combining kind of IT with the business, that's ultimately kind of what digital transformation is, leading the transformation of the organization through the use of technology. So I think there's still a lot of mindsets that need to change, but I think that those two working together, and Robert, you were spot on with terms of, you know, a lack of leadership from the IT side. That's where it should be driving. At that level, they'd be sat in one room together, designing where the business is going and how you're going to enable that through technology.
I was just going to add, Sam, to me, both what Cheryl and everyone said is, if you study how an organization measures itself, you'll find KPIs in the business that are very different than KPIs in technology, and they need to be separate because they're measuring two different things. But if you can't articulate how they tie together, and or that you don't appreciate what the other measure is, right, it's really hard to drive some of that improvement. So I think that's sort of the evolution that would continue as companies challenge this, is to build those effective KPIs and use that as a basis for communication.
Absolutely. We are rapidly approaching the end of our session. I know it is very sad. It makes me very sad. There are lots of unanswered questions, and that makes me sad. It's been a fantastic conversation, which makes me happy. I have a couple of announcements which will make you excited. The first one, I put it in the chat. There's a link in there to acceleratedsurvey.com. The good people at Accelerated Strategies, Mitch and team, are working on a software delivery survey that we're trying to figure out the connection. A lot of these connections we were just talking about between the technology and the business, and how do you align those two things together? So if you want to lend your voice to that survey, we would appreciate it. And if you go to the next slide, Anders, the last thing for us to sort of talk about here is the Software Delivery Leadership Forum is going unvirtual. And what does that mean, unvirtual? So this is obviously a virtual panel. All these people are not in the same room. Maybe you figured that out by now. But we are going to be, pending, you know, the government telling us we can get people together safely. We're planning DevOps World again this year. It's the largest DevOps conference in the universe. Used to be DevOps World Jenkins World, and we're making it a little bit more broad now. DevOps World, will there be Jenkins there? Absolutely. Will there be a leadership forum where folks can come and have conversations about topics like this and have engaging conversations back and forth, not have someone with a megaphone tell you how they did it, but to have a conversation and be able to ask questions about what we should do? The answer to that is absolutely we will. It'll either be, you know, either it'll be on site, or if we have to, we can do it virtual. These things work out pretty well. I want to thank our panelists for their time, especially those who've done this twice, and especially those who are doing this at, right now, it's 6:30 in the morning my time. So I want to thank myself and Anders for getting up so darn early. And actually, I'm just teasing. You don't have to, I need to thank myself. I'm super happy to be here. And then last but not least is, if you are interested in joining, I think Simone, I'd love to see you submit to this call for papers. Would love to hear you talking about what you're doing at whatever company you work at. I don't even know, from wherever country you're in, it doesn't even matter. So submit, talk about topics. There's a whole bunch of topics that we're interested in hearing from the teams about. But make your voice be heard, acceleratedsurvey.com or cloudbees.com/DevOpsWorld. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Evelyn, special thanks to you and the DevOps Institute. Research is fantastic. We're really happy to be sponsoring that research. Automation and AI is really great, but humans are great too. So good motion and something I can get behind. Anders, thank you very much. Thanks to the panel. Evelyn, audience, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.